Welcome to the Spark It podcast, where we explore stories, experiences, and insights that spark a fire within so that you can make your next big move. In this episode, we turn our focus to South Sudan, where the trial of Dr. Riek Machar, the country's first vice president, has captured global attention. Accused of treason, murder, and crimes against humanity, Machar's trial is not just a legal battle. It's a defining moment for South Sudan's fragile peace, justice, and political future. As questions arise about the court's legitimacy, political motivation, and the country's stability, we sit down with Emmanuel Taban, our in-house political analyst. Welcome, Emmanuel.
Thank you, Kimar.
Yeah, who he has been following the trial closely, and we hope to unpack what's really at stake for South Sudanese nationals and also the country at large. And together we explore whether is this about justice or power? Can South Sudan's judiciary stand independent? And what does this trial mean for peace and accountability in one of Africa's youngest nations? So again, thank you, Emmanuel, and welcome back to the episode. Thank you for making the time. We really appreciate you doing this with us again. So welcome to the pod. How
Thank
have you
you,
been?
Kimar. It's a good meeting up again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And how is your day so far?
Not bad. Just started my morning this side here, and started with some recordings, and exciting.
Nice. Nice.
Right.
I have been following this from your podcast, the Concern podcast. You have been dropping video after video about the trial. And I feel like most of the episodes you have been doing are very, very insightful, and they offer a little bit more context to the situation happening in South Sudan. And I would highly recommend for our viewers and listeners to also check out his podcast. It's called the Concerned Podcast. So today I want us to unpack exactly what is happening in South Sudan. And maybe you can give us a little bit of background to this very, very particular trial. And like in your own words, how would you describe the significance of Riek Machar's trial, and what does it reveal about the current political and justice landscape in South Sudan?
Okay. The current legal case that is going on in South Sudan can be dated back to early this year in March, when an incident happened in the northern part of the country in one of the counties called Nasir County, which is part of the 79 counties in South Sudan. So in March, there was an incident that happened where an armed militia group called the White Army engaged some of the government forces, the South Sudan People Defense Forces, in a kind of a battle. And because of the conflict that emerged, it led to the killing of so many other South Sudan Defense Forces officers, and also a major general called by the names of Major Dak. And when the incident happened, there were investigations that were done by the government side. And then because of the investigation that they had, they actually discovered that some of the people who were involved in the Nasser incident in coordinating between the armed militia group were actually part of the SPLM-IO, which is part of the current unity government in South Sudan. So they discovered very prominent people like Dr. Machar, the Minister of Petroleum called Pokang, and then another guy, like a general and a member of parliament, another great business person also, who were all allied to the SPLM-IO. And because the government established their findings, they had to put the first vice president under house detention, and they also arrested the other main individuals who were linked to this incident. They were all put under arrest, and the government established a team of investigation, which was actually to carry out and find if at all these people were involved in the incident. And just late last month, the government, through the Ministry of Justice, came out with their findings, and they charged these people with all the charges that were made: treason, financing terrorism, conspiracy, murder, and committing human atrocities. So these were some of the charges that were made against the first vice president and his colleagues, and that actually met the judiciary of the country to establish a special court to try these individuals. And for now, the case is ongoing. It's on its eighth session that is starting on Wednesday this week. So that is what is mainly happening. And to so many people, people have like a different kind of feelings about this case. To people who are so much allied to the first vice president, Dr. Machar, they look at this case not as a way of the government wanting to maybe hold these individuals accountable, but also seeking for justice. But they look at it as a way, like a politically motivated case that is initiated by the government side to just witch hunt the likes of Machar, who is his closest opponent. So many people look at it that way, but also to other people, they look at this issue as a way of accountability and a way of actually justifying that there's no one above the law. Even if you are the first vice president, if you're charged with crime such as this, then you stand the high chances of facing the law and be tried. So it's met with mixed reaction. Some people look at it as a major stance towards accountability and justice, and then to other people, they look at it like as a political witch hunt, which is mainly meant to
Yeah.
target Machar and maybe eliminate him from the politics of the country. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, I think it's good that you've actually talked about the whole incident of witch hunting, because as I was reading more about his trial and also listening to your episodes, I saw there's this idea of the trial is being widely seen through sort of a political lens, which is what you've talked about, like it's a witch hunt, because I mean, he was a first vice president, and then there's this thing that happens. And yeah, I saw that a lot of actually people died during that attack, around 250 people, which
Right.
is really concerning in a space where you're trying to come up, like have peace so that the country can be moved forward. So in 2018, there was the Revitalized Peace Agreement. How do you think, knowing what this contains, how do you think that this particular trial influences or complicates the trial against now Dr. Riek Machar?
Um, I think I'm one of the people who really don't believe so much in uh, the revitalized peace agreement. Yes, I respect the fact that the agreement has actually created for us some kind of peace through the establishment of the unity government, where the warring parties a little bit feel that they are restrained, like they're not so much getting back into war. But when we look at the long the long-term impact of the peace agreement, I feel it's not that really a very good thing, according to my observation. That is my personal opinion, because in line with the current trial, um, the country right now has no permanent constitution. We are borrowing so many laws from different documents. We are borrowing it from the transitional constitution of the country that was established, and then we're also borrowing from the revitalized peace agreement. The revitalized peace agreement itself established the unity government with all the structures, the presidency, which constitutes the president of the Republic of South Sudan, the first vice president of the Republic of South Sudan, who is Riek Machar, and all the other four vice presidents. And in that agreement, I think the constitution, the revitalized peace agreement did not specifically establish where if Machar will have an immunity, or even the president or the other first presidents. The transitional constitution, however, established that the vice president does not have does not have immunity. He can be tried even when he holds that position as the first vice president. But the difference here is that in the transitional constitution was established without the vision of seeing South Sudan in a state where we have a first vice president and then four vice president, a presidency that constitute like six individuals or six individuals. It was established in a manner that sees South Sudan having only a president and then the first vice president. So I think the court is applying the transitional constitution, which stipulates that the vice president, not the first vice president, does not have immunity. So, I mean, these are two contrasting documents that I
Yeah.
feel it's really, really so hard right now. But at the end of the day, the judiciary of the country, which is tasked with the responsibility of interpreting the law, decided that it has the jurisdiction and that Machar does not actually have the immunity. So it is the constitution of the country. I mean, it is the judiciary of the country. And in the
Mm-hmm.
first place, it is the people of South Sudan who decided that they should have such an institution, that if the people misunderstands the law, then they interpret it. And the decision that they came up with is that Machar doesn't have the immunity and that the courts as well has the jurisdictional mandate to try Machar in the special court. So that's what it decided to go with. But there's a lot of, I mean, confusion in the law right now, according to my observation, because we are relying on two different documents established at two different times that is meant to serve two different purposes. The
Wow.
transitional constitution did not look at South Sudan getting into the current situation where it had to go to civil war in 2013 and go into peace agreement and having a unity government. And then the revitalized peace agreement is established with not actually bringing in some of the things in the transitional constitution. So these are two conflicting documents to my observation. Yeah.
Wow, that's really interesting. So, in short, we could conclude that what South Sudan also needs, apart from, even as this trial is ongoing, could be like a very solid constitution that could govern it into the future.
That is right. Right now, I think the country is in constitutional crisis, I would say, because one, it is during this revitalized peace agreement that established that before the transitional government ends its mandate, it has to establish a permanent constitution for the country. But I mean, the whole process is now being it's being made hard because of the current issues happening back home. I mean, it's hard to establish a permanent constitution, and the country is supposed to get into election next year in December.
Wow.
And one of the conditions is that before the country gets into the election, they need to have a permanent constitution. And but it seems like it's hard to get it right now because we have a very only like a 1 year period of time remaining, and making a constitution that can be impactful, it needs a longer time. It needs consultation from the people. It needs a lot of minds to be brought in. And I feel having a constitution, it's one way that can determine the future of the country. But at the moment, I feel that the country is in constitutional crisis because we don't have the specific rules that is to follow. I mean, we are borrowing from so much. Yeah.
Do you think, I think sometimes, in my own opinion, sometimes politicians and people in power, they sort of do some sort of man-made chaos instead of, like, for example, you've talked about the constitution being very important for South Sudan, but everyone is taking their sweet time and not necessarily prioritizing it, yet you need that for the elections to happen. Do you think that is what is playing out in South Sudan because there's people maybe who want to stick around longer than they should and they don't want South Sudan to go into an election?
Again, according to my opinion, I would say yes, because I mean it's very clear. One is that, and in most cases, I really blame the people who drafted the peace agreement. I mean, like
Mhm.
it doesn't really make any sense because one, the peace agreement established the unity government
Okay.
where it established the presidency, as I said, having like six president, the first vice president, and then the six other vice president. The agreement
Mhm.
also established like about 45 ministers, that is including head ministers and then the deputy ministers. And then the
Mm.
peace agreement again established like 650 members of legislative assembly, 650
Wow. That's a
members
lot.
of, and these people are all unelected. They are not
Mhm.
elected by South Sudanese. These are people who are just
Oh.
established because of the peace agreement. We need to have a unity government. And also, the worst thing is that the peace agreement gave these same people who are not elected the mandate to
Mhm.
actually extend the lifespan of the transitional government. Now you can imagine that these are people
Yeah.
who are unelected by the people,
Mhm.
and the peace agreement says on an occasion where we have an election held, then the whole government will be dissolved. We will no longer have
Yeah.
the 5 presidents. And do you think these people, these vice presidents who knows very well that when we have an election held, they are not going to be there anymore? You think these people will be willing to actually lead the country into having a transitional, period where we can have an election and then have their government? They will always never do that. They will
It's
look
like a
for ways.
conflict of interest.
Conflict of interest, because they know once we have an election, the election
Yeah.
is going to only create a president and vice president. We're not going to have the other
Yeah.
five, other 4 presidents. They're not going to be there. And the constitution gives this vice president the mandate to extend the lifespan of this. So they'll obviously go on expanding it over and over again. So that is my only worry. And I feel that I think the people who actually drafted the peace agreement, they didn't do well to the South Sudanese people. This is going to go down so badly. It's going to impact. We may even end up being just ruled by the unity government. It might be hard for us to have an election
To
in
transition.
the next
Yeah.
year, because over 650 people know that once we have an
They'll be
election, they're not going to
jobless.
be in their positions. They're not going to have the position. Over 45
Yeah.
ministers knows that
Mm.
when we have a well-established government, probably they're not competent. They're not going to get back into their ministerial position. Over 6 presidents or 4 vice presidents know that by the time we have an elections, they're not going to get back into their vice president position. And therefore, they are willing to continue expanding the lifespan of the transitional government so they can keep in power.
Yeah.
So that is a basic, kind of thing you can see. It doesn't need one even to look deep into it. It's just laid out straight.
I think that's actually really sad. And maybe for change to happen, or maybe for an election to happen, it would require like a lot of goodwill, especially from the current leadership. They would have to get to a point where they become more selfless, and they consider who they are actually representing and stuff like that. Because yeah, it's definitely whatever you've said is really true. To get to an election it's a very big task, and I hope one day you actually get there.
Right.
So Riek Machar, now that he's going through this trial, I hear there is a lot of security at this point. At some point, there was broadcasting. Now there is no broadcasting allowed. Could you probably take us through that sort of thing and how it impacts his trial?
Um, on the first day of the trial, that was I think on the 11th of September. The courts convened at Freedom Hall with only one media house allowed to cover the whole trial, and that is the state-owned media house called SSBC, the South Sudan Broadcasting Corporation. So they were the only media house allowed to enter the premises of the courts to cover live the trial of Machar. And then on that day, the judge the panel of judges were constituted to carry on the trial. They actually made a ruling that the following sitting, all media houses should be allowed to go in and cover the trial. But there were also restrictions they were given to adhere to their ethics as a media houses, as these media houses. They were given the rules, and at any point should they violate those, then they will be thrown out of the premises. They were given this. So for that reason, on the second session, all media houses were allowed to go into the premises, and the courts said it is for sake of transparency. They want it to be broadcasted when everyone is seeing. And also members of the public were allowed to go to the premises of the courts to attend it. And most of those who accessed the premises were the closest family members to the accused and other, relatives and guys who are politically allied to them. They had access to the premises. On the third and fourth day, on the third day, I think they were allowed, but on the fifth, on the fourth and fifth, sixth day, um, because the court had reached a phase where they were now collecting statements from witnesses. The court had to listen to a request from the prosecution side, who actually are defending the state, saying they need the media houses not to be covering that phase, because they're dealing with private people who are going to be witnesses, and they want to protect the identity of these people. So the court grants that request, and therefore they did not allow the public to access the premises and also the media houses. And then it continued until I think today there was no full access, but we're expecting that in the next session, on the 8th session, the media will fully get back to the premises, and then they can access the premise of the courts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I
Interesting.
mean, it was ruled that it
Mhm.
was constitutional, because
Mhm.
also those people who are going to give their
The
statement as
testimony.
witnesses,
Mhm.
they need to be
Mhm.
protected. They need to be protected.
That's
So
true.
there was nothing wrong about it. It wasn't some
Okay.
kind of unconstitutional way. It was so many people agreed with it. Even the defense team agreed with it. The prosecution and members of the public. So, but we're expecting the media houses to get back maybe in the next session. Yeah.
It actually makes sense because that's a very high level case. So you want to protect the identities of the people involved. In one of your episodes, you talked about this being a very good move towards constitutionalism. And you also talked a lot about what is it called, the judiciary. So, for example, this particular case, they set up a special court to handle this case. Do you believe in the legitimacy and independence required to deliver a fair trial for the people involved or the people who have been accused?
I mean, I've always believed in independency of every government institution, every government organ, including the judiciary. And this is a historical moment in South Sudan right now. It's the first of its kind. Our judiciary has never ever got involved in such a high profile case, a case that involved most of the high ranking officials of the country. I mean, this is a moment that would either mean so much for the judiciary of the country, or could even get the country back into zero. This is a very decisive moment. And from the look of things, I've been following the prosecution, and I just like how it's going on at the moment. I mean, I don't see any members of the executive getting. I don't. Maybe if there is some kind of like it's done maybe in privacy or secret, but I don't see any kind of threats coming from both sides. I don't see threats coming from the government towards the defense. I don't see, I mean, to the accused. I don't see threats coming from the side of the accused towards the government. And also the fact that the courts were able to make their rulings saying that, I mean, accepting media houses to get into for the case of transparency, and also like adhering to some of the claims. I mean, you could see that it's a kind of a fair kind of trial, but until
Mm-hmm.
the end of the case, it might be hard for us to tell exactly what is the intention of the court is. But at the moment, I'm seeing like there's no kind of biasness being presented by the judiciary. I mean, the judiciary has been the court, the constituted court has been following the all the legal procedures. And I feel at the moment, I don't see any kind of the courts being biased at the side of the accused.
Okay.
And as I said, that this is a very, very decisive moment for the country. And it all lies on the judiciary. The ball is at their hands. So they have the power to give a verdict that can either take the country. I mean, people wouldn't be so much, I mean, worried if the
Mm-hmm.
court is able to give a
Mm-hmm.
verdict that says Machar has committed, or Machar and his colleagues are actually convicted of the crimes that were charged against him. And
Mm-hmm.
there are proofs beyond doubt that he has really
Yeah.
committed them. I mean, if all
Mm-hmm.
the members of the public are able to be convinced that these are the things that Machar, that can actually tell that Machar has committed these, that he's involved in the murder, the conspiracy, financing terrorism, and all the other acts, and that these are the evidences. If the court is able to come out with that very boldly, I mean, there's no one who is gonna get worried about it, because
Yeah.
we know that at the end of
Mm-hmm.
the day, we need law to prevail, and that no matter what position you hold, you must always be subjected to face the law. But if the courts maybe does it in a way that the members of the public are able to see clearly that they are being biased, I think that is the way. That's when the country will go the wrong direction. But all the court needs to do is make it in a very transparent manner that can convince the entire South Sudan society that the trial has been fair and the verdict that is passed is worth it, and there's no one who's going to complain about it. But also, there's no problem when they. I mean, it will also be a very good one if the courts pass a verdict that all the claims that were given by the state actually are baseless, and therefore Machar is not guilty. I mean, and then the government goes on and upholds that verdict, and then bring back Machar to his position. I mean, it will mean so much for the country. That would mean that, I mean, there is rule of law already existing. People will look
Yeah.
at the president that he is upholding the decision of the judiciary, and there's independency. People can easily see that
Yeah.
Machar was charged, and then the courts comes out with a verdict that the claims were baseless, and the president comes back and brings him, reinstate him to his position. So that would mean that there's already, I mean, people will see political goodwill. People will see the president willing to uphold the rule of law. And that's all what, I mean, everything right now lies in the judiciary.
Wow. In short, we could clearly see that we can say this is a make or break case. It kind of determines what the future of South Sudan looks like, whether
Exactly.
the rule of law is upheld or not, and it will determine a lot. So I believe as you've said, if the court like does its due diligence in the best way possible and delivers something like a free and fair trial, then it means that they'll give people the confidence in the institutions that the country is trying to build around, so that you as a country can actually move forward. And in the context of Salva Kiir, the president, and now Riek Machar, who was his vice president, to what extent do you think this trial is just about justice, or maybe versus power and political struggles? Does that play a role, or you think it's free and fair what is happening?
I think I wouldn't really buy the belief that this is a political, it's a politically motivated kind of case. Because you could easily see it's very clear. I mean, we all know that Machar and Kira, they have been opponents. I mean, very, very close. I mean, very, very, they have been like political opponents for quite a long time, since 2013 when it happened. But over and over again, they came back to work together. And they believe, I don't buy the belief that this is it's politically motivated, because I mean, everyone saw that there was an incident that happened in Nasir. There
Yeah.
was an exchange, I mean, between government forces and the armed militia. Everyone knows that, I mean, over 200 people were killed in that incident. Everyone knows that there was a major general who was killed in Nasir. And therefore, that thing does not happen in a vacuum. There is always someone who might be behind it. But I'm not saying it is Machar. The government has come out with their claims that it is Machar who has done it. And of course, we know someone died, people died. I mean, there was a lot of destruction of property, UN helicopter
Yeah.
crashed and all this sort of stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
then the government needs to now provide more proofs that it is really Machar beyond doubt who has done that, or Machar and his colleagues. I wouldn't buy the belief that it's politically motivated, because this case is informed by the incident that happened back in March. So it is clearly evident by many South Sudanese that there was an exchange of firearms between the government and the armed
Mm-hmm.
militia. But then all we're waiting for is for proofs to be presented beyond doubt that actually these
Mm-hmm.
people um, committed the so said crimes. So yeah.
Interesting. So, okay. So maybe going back to what we were talking about, as far as the outcomes of this particular trial, let's say, for example, it comes out he's guilty, or maybe he's not guilty. As you said, the court would need to give reasonable, like, they say what, beyond reasonable doubt that these people were involved in what happened. So in the context of peace and stability in South Sudan, definitely whatever the outcome of the trial is, it could actually maybe help or maybe destabilize, depending on how people end up taking it. What do you think the court in particular needs to do, especially while delivering their verdict, to convince the people for example, or even as South Sudanese nationals, what do you think the people need to be like? In what kind of state should people be at? Should they stay open-minded for both outcomes so that we can continue with the little peace and stability that is there, or maybe the peace and stability that is there? So in both ends, for the people and for the court, what needs to be done so that people can be prepared for both outcomes?
I think, as I said, that there's so many people who look at Machar in a
Mm-hmm.
different angle. There's so many people who are so much allied to the first vice president,
Mm.
and that they are willing to stand with him no matter what, you know.
Okay.
And as I said, Machar comes from one of the communities that constitute the biggest population in the country, the second most populous communities in South Sudan, the Nuer ethnic group.
Mm-hmm.
And there are people, regardless of the outcome, I mean, regardless of the evidence that the court might present, and if the court pass a verdict that Machar is guilty, there are people who will never take that as it is, right? They will look at it just like as something that is mainly made against him, a plan orchestrated by the government against him. That is clear. They will never be convinced that indeed he did that, even if the court presented beyond doubt that he committed that. Now this brings me back to the people. I think people should have like an open mind to receive whatever verdict that the court is going to pass. But also, another major responsibility lies on the executive of the country, and mainly the government. Because if I was the president, and if I was Kir, and should uh, the courts maybe pass a verdict that Machar is not guilty, that he is a free man at the end of this trial, I will
Mm-hmm.
uphold him. Okay. I will uphold it
Ah,
and then reinstate him back to his position. I will tell the public that we tried to give our evidence that he was judged, but now the judiciary or the courts gave a verdict that he was actually free man. He did not participate in it. And for that reason, I'm reinstating him back to his position. But also, as the president of the country, if Machar is charged, and then, I mean, if Machar is found guilty, if I was president, Kir,
mm-hmm.
if the court decide and say Machar is guilty, he was involved in all this, I mean, sometimes we don't have to just rely on the law. We should have some other consideration, look at the country in a broader way. As a president, I will analyze what is going to be the impact of this. Should we go with this? Should we go with the
Yeah.
with this decision that the court is coming? Perhaps I would say, like as a leader, you should have like sometimes a sympathy. I would say, yes, I will address the public as well and tell them that we have charged him, and the courts have convicted him. They have proved beyond doubt that he was charged with it. But we know the impact of this, what it's going to create, right? If we continue with this verdict, we know maybe at this time, I would say we're not going to maybe imprison him, or we can look for other alternatives. Perhaps just get him out of the vice president position, but not jail him, and just look for other means to, I mean, appease the people. Because
Mm.
I mean, we all believe that there must be a law in the country. But even
Yeah.
when we believe that there must be law, we should also consider the impact of maybe applying the law in the country. How is it going to impact on the greater population of the country? So, I mean, at that point, also, there's so much that the government side or the president needs to do in terms of portraying a sympathy and then trying to safeguard the future of the country. Because as I said, that there are people who look at Machar as more than just like as a politician. To them, to some people, it means like a demigod. There are people who are
Yeah.
ready to die for him regardless.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
and these people, when we see a verdict passed against them, then obviously there's something bad that's going to happen. So, and that's where the president also has to act some restraint and apply some sympathy on the verdict that is going to be passed in case it comes against my child. Yeah.
So it's more of like a collective responsibility. The judiciary needs to play its part,
Right.
and if whatever verdict they offer, they need to make sure that the public is well informed. Like, why did we arrive at this decision? And if it's for the people, for you, according to what you're saying, the call to action would be, let's be open-minded.
Right.
Whatever the outcome is, whether it's positive or it's negative, depending on what somebody was expecting, they should be ready to embrace whatever the outcomes are. And
Right.
also the context of maybe the, as you said, the political goodwill, then maybe the government should consider leniency in case of the accused maybe they are, if it's true that's what they actually did.
Right.
And maybe even consider political exile. It could be even a better thing instead of jailing somebody.
Right. Exactly.
As an outcome, instead of jailing somebody, maybe you give them like some political exile for a few years until
Exactly.
the country gets back to its feet and something like that. Yeah, so yeah, the way I see it, as you've explained, it's more of collective responsibility on the people, the judiciary, and the executive. Oh yeah.
Right.
And what do you think? What role should regional and international actors play to ensure fairness and prevent this trial from escalating tensions in South Sudan?
I mean, like just like a country, every country has their own rules, right? We have all our institutions of government, and then the regional bodies help the South Sudan people to come up with the peace agreement in the mediation and all crafting the revitalized peace agreement. And they hope that the South Sudanese people can do things themselves. So right now we do have our courts that is in charge of the whole case. And we wouldn't at this moment like an influence from any other person outside, right? At the moment, because that is the judiciary of the country that is handling the issue. Perhaps the regional body will now come at the aftermath of this case. If they see that whatever verdict is passed and then it's going to impact, then they can call on the leaders of the country to maybe take an alternatives. But at the moment, I feel there's no so much influence that is needed from, because South Sudan is also an independent state that has its own institutions and organs of government, and that's what exactly the country is doing. They're trying to. I know it's struggling at some point, but yeah, at some point we will get there. So this is a big step for the country, and at this point, I wouldn't expect any influence from the regional bodies or the neighboring countries. They will come in probably after the verdict is passed. And if they see that a certain verdict is going to maybe impact so much on the future of the country, that is when they'll have to urge the government to maybe
Yeah.
take a restraint. Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense.
All right.
And now, this particular trial, and maybe like a lesson for rule of law for South Sudan, in the context of the people and as the outsiders, what does this trial reveal about the state of rule of law and the judicial independence in South Sudan?
Um, as I said that, the country is it's an independent state, and we all do have uh, organs of government, just like in any other country. South Sudan has the
Mm-hmm.
three organs. We have the executive, we have the legislature, and we have the judiciary. So, and uh, the it's supposed to be that all these bodies act independently without the influence
Yeah.
of the other. So,
Mm-hmm.
in a case where we see the judiciary taking up the case and then trying to preside over it without any influence, maybe from the executive, we wouldn't expect any influence from the executive. And then if the judiciary continue to do it that way without any interference from any other person, then that would really mean so much. I mean, credit will go so much to them. And just like an incident happened in Kenya that gave the Chief Justice, the former Chief Justice during Uhuru Kenyatta's time, David Maraga. Remember, this is a guy who was appointed by Uhuru Kenyatta to be
Yeah.
the chief justice of the Supreme Court, and then in Uhuru's second term, he had to pass. I mean, when there was an appeal made that the elections were not conducted in a free and fair manner,
Yeah.
then he ruled against he ruled on that actually he proved that the election was not conducted in a fair way, even when he was appointed by Uhuru Kenyatta. I think that gave
Mm-hmm.
Maraga he is considered one of the best chief justices in the country. He is a
Yeah.
retired one, and there's so much respect for him. It is because he took the mantle to act independently. The judiciary was not influenced by the executive, even when he was appointed by the executive. So I feel that's the same thing that probably the judiciary of South Sudan needs to do. Even when they're appointed by the president, then they have to act independently, and credit will go
True.
back to them from the South Sudanese people. I think that's what they really have to do at the moment.
That's interesting. I totally agree. And how do you think, like, us people from South Sudan should engage with this trial to promote justice and peace? Like, what can a normal person, a common person do?
I have been following this on social media, and I'm already seeing that people have like very, very diverging opinions about it. People are already aligning themselves. I mean, the different sides
Mm-hmm.
of others are aligning themselves with the state, others with the accused, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I feel it's their political. I mean, they have the right to associate with whoever they want, right? They have the
Mm-hmm.
right to give their opinion. It's not a crime to think about something, so they can give whatsoever thing. But we should also understand the nature of our country. I feel that we shouldn't really get engaged so much in the physical manner, because some political things are very sensitive and they are
Yeah.
so emotive that if we start
Mm-hmm.
discussing it with the fellow guy who we're seeing having diverging views, we might end up doing so much harm to ourselves. So I would expect people to engage uh, uh, themselves in this case with restraint. Try to present your opinion, but not in the most harmful manner to each one. Yeah. But
Mm-hmm.
also respect the independency of the judiciary as a citizen. You have to respect, because in the first place, we are the one who established it. We say we want to have a judiciary, so need to let it act independently.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I also would add what we had talked about, staying very open minded for any outcome, because at the end of the day, if we want to move forward, then a country needs the rule of law to be upheld. So people need to be very ready for any outcome, whether it's positive or negative.
Right.
Okay, that's interesting. And what has stood out for you when you are analyzing these particular situation, because you've been following up with this trial from the very beginning? What has stood out for you the most, and what question
Um,
would you want us to ask the people directly involved?
I think one of the most interesting thing about this trial is that it has actually awakened so many South Sudanese. That's one thing that I've seen. People who are
Mm-hmm,
politically dormant, I mean, the citizens of
mm-hmm,
South Sudan who are politically dormant, most of them are awake.
yeah.
And I always
Mm-hmm,
feel happy when I see so many South Sudanese engaging with the political affairs of their country online and in whatsoever form. That is what exactly that I'm seeing right now for the last 2 weeks or so. I mean, South Sudanese have really been presenting their opinions. I mean, there seems to be awakened because of this
mm-hmm,
case, and I'm
mm-hmm,
I'm really excited about that. And also, we have so many people who went and they study law in the country, and they seems to be so much excited about this case. And I feel that is really one of the most exciting things that I've seen. Seeing South Sudanese engaging with the political affairs of their country, giving their opinions, and just getting excited over this case. I mean, it's very, very, very good one. And that's what I feel stood out of this entire case, because the citizens are so much awake at the moment. They are following it closely. They want to see what is going to be the impact of this, I mean, the outcome of this. And this has actually put the judiciary on the spotlight, because everyone is following the case, which is exciting.
I think that's amazing, especially when something like this generating conversation, whether it's online or offline. I think it, as you've talked about, that sort of awakening, it awakens the people to realize that also they play a role in some of these things, or how they would want the conversation to be driven forward, or how they want to be ruled. And what would be your final thoughts on this matter as we conclude the episode?
My final, I would say, I wish uh, everyone good luck, and let's
Mm-hmm.
keep following this closely. I mean, it's very important case, and this will go down in the history of our country as one of the most high profile court cases in the country. Probably this will be referred to in so many years to come. We will refer to this case in so many years to come. And to those South Sudanese who are engaging on this case on social media or in whatsoever form, do it with respect. I mean, of each other, like respect each other's opinion. At the end of the day, you can argue, but you don't have the power to pass a verdict. It's the courts at the end of the day. So whereas you can give your opinion on what you think about this case, also you need to respect the fact that it's going to be the judiciary of the country to pass a verdict about this case. So respect the judiciary and let's be open-minded. Let's welcome whatever verdict that is going to be passed by the courts, as long as it is proven to be right. So we should always adhere to the court's ruling. Yeah.
Yeah, and also for me, I would add that there's always life beyond
Exactly.
the current politicians that we have.
Right.
These politicians might not be there forever, but you need a country. You need a country
Exactly.
for the generation now, for the next generation, and the next after that. So people need to also start considering that, because I feel like sometimes we romanticize the idea, or
Exactly.
maybe or a particular politician in our heads, and we are like, oh, this is like our, as you talked about, somebody being like a demigod in your head and something like that, until to an extent where it breeds violence and stuff like that. So we need to think beyond them and see them as just part of the transition for
Right.
South Sudan into a better future.
Right.
That's what I would say. Yeah.
Exactly.
So, Emmanuel, you should tell people to subscribe to your channel.
Okay, yeah. So if you are watching this, you can subscribe to Concern Podcast, and you can find more stories regarding the ongoing case and other cases about South Sudan and about East Africa, particularly Kenya and Uganda, that I have so much knowledge about it. So yeah, feel free, if you're someone passionate about politics, just don't
Mhm.
hesitate to hit the subscription button and also the notification button so you can get notified of so many other videos that I'm going to upload. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Emmanuel, for gracing our podcast once again. We really appreciate you making the time and offering us insights into South Sudan and the current case against Riek Machar. And for our listeners and viewers, thank you for always tuning in to the Sparkit podcast. We appreciate your support. We see you on our social media platforms engaging with our content, and we appreciate it. Until the next video, you can listen to our podcast on our podcasting platform from wherever you listen from, and also follow us on our social media and YouTube channel. Until the next time, I'm your host, Helen Kimaru. Bye bye.
Bye.